Via parents, I celebrated Christmas alone while they celebrated with relatives in Europe, and now they want financial assistance for my sister's wedding, and I cut them off. I've never told this story in full to anyone because I still feel like an idiot for staying as long as I did. But looking back, it was the moment I realized I had to cut ties for good. It started 2 years ago, a few weeks before Christmas. I was 27 and still living at home with my parents. Not because I wanted to, but because my divorce a year earlier had wiped me out financially. My ex-wife and I didn't have any kids, so there wasn't much of a fight, but the division of everything left me barely scraping by. Moving back in with my parents was supposed to be temporary, a way to save money. Instead, it turned into a constant reminder of why I'd left home in the first place. Anyway, my parents weren't exactly the warm and fuzzy type. My dad had a way of saying things that felt more like insults wrapped in advice, and my mom, well, let's just say she never missed an opportunity to let me know how much of a disappointment I was compared to my younger sister, Rebecca. She was 20, still living at home, but somehow they treated her like royalty. About a week before Christmas, I came home from work to find them packing suitcases in the living room. At first I thought they were going through old luggage or something. Then my dad casually said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to France tomorrow to spend Christmas with your aunt and cousins." I just stood there stunned. I didn't even know we had plans with relatives in France, let alone that they were leaving the country. And then my mom said, "If you'd been more like Rebecca and actually listened to us, we might have bought you a ticket." Rebecca was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, acting like it was completely normal. Apparently, they'd bought tickets for her and me weeks ago, but no one had thought to tell me. They left the next morning. No explanation, no apology, just a reminder that they'd be back in a week and that I should make better choices if I wanted to be included next year. That Christmas was probably the loneliest I'd ever felt. Everyone I knew had plans with their families, and I didn't want to call anyone and explain that my parents had abandoned me to spend the holidays in Europe. I tried to make the best of it. I ordered takeout, put on some Christmas movies, and told myself it didn't matter. But it did matter. As I scrolled through social media that night, I saw their posts. My parents and Rebecca were wearing matching sweaters, posing in front of a giant Christmas tree in some fancy Paris square. There were pictures of them at my aunt's house, laughing over a huge dinner, and my cousins tagged them in stories about how amazing everything was. The kicker? They hadn't posted a single picture with me in years, but they sure looked like the picture-perfect family when I wasn't around. After Christmas, they returned just before New Year's. I had prepared for their return, knowing they would bring up the trip, but I wasn't prepared for how casually cruel they would be about it. As soon as they walked in the door, my dad said, "Man, you really missed it. It was unbelievable, the best Christmas we've ever had." My mom added, "If you'd stop being so stubborn and actually take our advice, maybe you could have been a part of it. We're trying to help you." Rebecca didn't say much, but she grinned when my mom spoke. It was enough to set me off, but I bit my tongue. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing how much it bothered me. A day or two later, it was like they'd forgotten the whole thing. Then, out of nowhere, they sat me down at the kitchen table. My dad leaned over and said, "We need your help with something important." The thing is, this wasn't the first time they'd come to me for money. Living with them, I saw how reckless they were, always spending on unnecessary things while pretending to be struggling. But this time it wasn't for them. "We need you to help pay for Rebecca's wedding," my mother said. This took me by surprise. As far as I knew, Rebecca wasn't even engaged. "She and Nathan are getting married in March," my dad explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "But he's only 20, and you know he doesn't make much. You need to step up for your sister." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked at Rebecca, expecting her to jump in and explain, but she just sat there quietly, letting our parents do the talking. "Nathan's a great guy," my dad continued, as if I needed convincing. "He's young, sure, but he has potential. They're planning a small wedding, nothing crazy, but it's still going to cost more than they can handle right now. And it's not like you have a family to worry about, my mother added, as if that made it my responsibility. I sat there, trying to take it all in. Nathan was barely out of his teens and working an entry-level job. Rebecca didn't work much either. They wanted me to cover their wedding because, apparently, I had extra money since I was single. How much are we talking about? I finally asked. My mom smiled as if I'd just agreed to anything. Oh, not that much. Maybe $10,000? Just to get her started. We'll all pitch in. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity of it was incredible. Are you serious? You want me to fork over 10 grand so Rebecca can marry some guy who can't even afford it himself? Rebecca finally spoke up. You don't have to put it like that. Nathan and I love each other, and we'll do this no matter what. But it would be nice if you actually supported me for once. For once? I said, raising my voice. You've had their support your whole life. They bend over backwards for you, while I get left out of family trips and treated like an afterthought. That's when things got ugly. My dad called me selfish and said I'd always been jealous of Rebecca. My mom chimed in, saying they'd been patient with me, but I hadn't done anything to earn their respect. And Rebecca? She sat there nodding along, like I was really the bad guy for not wanting to blow my savings on her wedding. When I said no, it was like I dropped a bomb. My mom started yelling at me about how ungrateful I was for everything they'd done for me. My dad called me a loser for still living at home. Even Rebecca, who'd been quiet most of the time, snapped and said something about how Nathan would never treat his family the way I treated mine. I didn't stay to hear the rest. I left the house and drove around aimlessly for hours, trying to calm down. When I returned that night, the tension in the house was unbearable. My parents barely spoke to me, and Rebecca wouldn't even look at me. That's when I made my decision. I had to get out, no matter what it took. The next few days felt like living with strangers. My parents stopped talking to me unless it was absolutely necessary. When they did, it was brief and passive-aggressive. Rebecca, on the other hand, acted as if I didn't exist. She came in and out of the house with her usual entitlement, occasionally dropping hints about how some people don't understand family loyalty. I didn't respond to any of it. I was too busy planning my escape. The truth was, I didn't have much saved. Between paying off debts from the divorce and trying to keep up with their constant requests for help, my bank account wasn't exactly thriving. But I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Living there felt like a slow suffocation. That week, I started looking for an apartment. I didn't care how small or rundown they were, I just had to get out. Then came the final straw. It was a Friday night, and I had just gotten home from work. My mom was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, while my dad was watching TV. Rebecca wasn't there. I thought maybe I'd get a quiet evening, but no such luck. Out of nowhere, my mom said, "You know, Rebecca told us that she feels like you don't even want her to be happy. You really need to think about that." I ignored her and went to my room, but a few minutes later my dad called me into the living room. He had this smug look on his face, like he was about to say something he'd been holding back for a while. "We've been talking," he said, "and we think it's time for you to start paying more rent. You've lived here long enough for cheap." I couldn't believe it. I was already giving them money for food and bills, way more than I should have, and now they wanted me to pay more? For what? I asked. "So you can spend it on Rebecca's wedding?" That set him off. He started ranting about how I was being selfish and how he'd been more than generous in letting me stay after my divorce. My mom jumped in and said they had raised me wrong if I couldn't see the value of supporting my family. It all came out then, the resentment, the years of feeling like I was always second to Rebecca, the way they constantly manipulated me into giving them money or doing what they wanted. I told them I wasn't their ATM, and I wasn't going to keep sacrificing my own life for their bad decisions. My father called me a loser again. My mom told me I was pathetic for being so bitter. And when I looked at Rebecca, who'd just walked in, she smiled and said, "Good luck out there. You'll come crawling back." That was it. That night I packed a bag and stayed in my car. That night in my car was miserable, but in a strange way it was also freeing. I had no plan, no idea where I was going, but at least I wasn't in that house. I scrolled through apartment listings until I fell asleep, parked in a grocery store parking lot. The next morning I decided to go to a diner I used to go to when I was younger. It was one of those places where the coffee is terrible, but the regulars make it feel like home. I figured I'd sit there, collect my thoughts, and figure out my next move. While I was there, I got a text from my mom. "You need to come back and apologize. Your father and I will not tolerate this childish behavior." I didn't reply. 10 minutes later I got another text. "We gave you everything. Rebecca has always been the grateful one. You're lucky we put up with you as long as we did." This one stung, but I still didn't reply. Then, about an hour later, Rebecca texted me. "You left your laptop. I'm keeping it until you pay your share of the wedding." I almost laughed out loud in the middle of the diner. The audacity was unbelievable. My share? What was my share of a wedding I wasn't even invited to? But then it hit me, my laptop wasn't just for Netflix and bills. It had everything on it: work files, documents, even some of the freelance projects I was doing to make some extra cash. I couldn't afford to lose it. I decided to go back to the house, not to stay, but to get my stuff. I wasn't going to let them hold my laptop hostage. When I got there, it was worse than I thought. My mom was waiting in the living room with Rebecca, both of them sitting there like they were plotting something. My dad wasn't there, but I could hear the TV in the other room. "I'm just here to get my stuff," I said, walking straight to my room. Rebecca followed me and leaned against the doorframe. "Are you really going to throw a tantrum over this? Nathan and I are trying to start our lives and all you care about is yourself." I ignored her and started grabbing what I could. Clothes, books, my phone charger. But when I reached for my laptop, Rebecca grabbed it. "Not until you pay," she said. I stared at her, trying to keep my cool. "Give it back. Make me," she said, smiling like it was all a game. Just then, my dad walked in, clearly annoyed. "What's going on?" Before I could say anything, Rebecca said, "He's being a jerk about the wedding again." That was enough to set him off. He started yelling about how ungrateful I was, how I was a failure, how I'd never amount to anything. He even threw in a comment about my divorce, saying it was no wonder I ended up alone. I'd put up with a lot from him over the years, but that crossed the line. "You know what?" I said, finally snapping. "You're right. I am alone. But at least I'm not stuck here, using my kids to finance my life because I can't manage my own money. And Rebecca? Good luck with Nathan, because when he can't even buy a ring, you're going to find out exactly how much you're worth to him." The room fell silent. For once, they had nothing to say. I grabbed my laptop out of Rebecca's hands, shoved the rest of my stuff into a bag, and walked out. As I left, my mom yelled something about how I'd regret this, how I'd come crawling back. But I knew I wouldn't. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my life. I didn't have much: a duffel bag of clothes, my laptop, and my car, but at least I was free. The next few days were hectic. I crashed on a friend's couch while I looked for an apartment. I didn't want to explain everything, so I just told him I needed a fresh start. He didn't ask any questions, and honestly, I was grateful for that. I finally found a tiny studio apartment on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom, but it was mine. No one could barge in, no one could demand anything of me, and no one could use me as a backup plan. As soon as I moved in, I decided to block my parents and Rebecca from everything: phone, social media, email. It felt drastic, but I knew if I didn't, they'd keep trying to pull me back in. At first, the silence was unsettling. I'd spent so much time putting up with their nonsense that I didn't know what to do with myself now that it was gone. But then something unexpected happened. A week after I moved in, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. It was Nathan. "Hey man," he said, his voice awkward and tentative. I know things have been tough lately, but I just wanted to talk. I was stunned. Of everyone, Nathan was the last person I expected to hear from. What do you want? I asked, not bothering to hide my annoyance. There was a long pause before he said, Rebecca doesn't know I'm calling, but I wanted to tell you, I think you're right. I blinked, not sure if I'd heard him right. Right about what? About the wedding. About everything. He went on to explain that Rebecca and my parents had put a lot of pressure on him, too. Apparently, they'd been pushing him to ask his parents for money, and when he said no, they started blaming him for the whole situation. They keep saying I need to step up, he said, but I'm already working 2 jobs just to keep up with the rent. I don't know how I'm going to pay for a wedding on top of that. For a moment I felt sorry for him. Nathan wasn't the villain here, he was just another pawn in my parents' game. But I also couldn't ignore the fact that he'd gone along with it for so long. So what do you want from me? I asked. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, he said. And I understand now. I think you did the right thing getting out of there. It wasn't what I expected, but it didn't change anything. Nathan was still tied to Rebecca, and as far as I was concerned, that meant he was still part of the problem. Good luck, I said and hung up. That was the last I heard from him. After that call from Nathan, I knew I had made the right decision. Cutting off my parents and Rebecca wasn't just about getting away from their constant demands, it was about taking my life back. For years, I'd let them control me, guilt me, and make me feel less than. Now, for the first time, I was free. The weeks that followed were quiet, almost eerily so. Without my parents' constant nagging or Rebecca's entitled attitude in the background, I had space to really think about what I wanted. I focused on my freelance work, got a second part-time job to keep me afloat, and started saving. I heard through a mutual friend that Rebecca's wedding had been a disaster. Nathan's parents refused to contribute, and when my parents realized they couldn't squeeze any more money out of me, they were forced to cut back on everything. Rebecca went through with it anyway, but the whole thing was obviously rushed and embarrassing. Nathan quit his second job not long after the wedding, and the strain of being broke while living with Rebecca and my parents caused him to move out a few months later. No surprise there. As for my parents, they tried to reach out a few times through mutual contacts, friends, extended family, even my old neighbors. But I stood firm. I didn't respond to any of it. Eventually they gave up, or at least stopped trying so hard. It wasn't easy to rebuild my life from the ground up. My apartment was small, my budget was tight, and there were nights when the loneliness hit me harder than I expected. But over time, I began to feel better. Like I was finally becoming the person I wanted to be, not the person my parents were trying to mold me into. A year later, I got a better job in my field, which allowed me to move into a nicer apartment. It wasn't luxurious by any means, but it felt like home. I started reconnecting with old friends, people I'd drifted away from during the chaos of my family drama. I even started dating again, nothing serious yet, but it's nice to feel like I have options. But the biggest surprise came about 2 months ago. I got an email from Rebecca. It was short, just a few sentences, but the tone was completely different from the Rebecca I knew. She admitted that she had made mistakes, that she had been selfish, and that she hadn't realized how much our parents had used both of us until it was too late. She said she was sorry and hoped that someday I'd consider talking to her again. I haven't responded yet. Part of me wants to believe she's sincere, but another part of me wonders if it's just another ploy. For now, I'll let it go. These days I live a simple life. I work hard, keep to myself, and focus on the things that bring me peace. I've realized that family isn't about who you're born to, it's about who you choose to let into your life. And honestly, I don't regret choosing to let mine go. Because for the first time in years, I'm actually happy. And that's more than I ever thought I could be.